Hello, Manatee County. Welcome back to another edition of Manatee Herald's Let's Talk, where liberal political careers come to die. On this episode, we're going to meet Kurt Landefeld. He is opposing Bill Sanders in Ward 4 for the city of Bradenton. If you read my column, which I always say you should, and if you're not, shame on you, you should already know kind of where Bill Sanders is. We're going to talk to Kurt a little bit about why he's so different from Bill, which probably doesn't take a lot, but we'll also talk to him about what his agenda is if he's fortunate enough to be elected. We'll talk a little bit about, I know one of the big subjects is the city's been trying to sell off City Hall for so long now it's not even funny, but it looks like it's actually heading in that direction. We'll get to know Kurt a little bit. He's been in Manatee County for about 6 years now. He's not new to politics, but he is new to Manatee County politics. So, we'll take a look and we'll see how that conversation goes. And we'll get a quick word in from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Welcome, Manatee County, to another edition of Manatee Herald's Let's Talk, where spin is a sin and we just won't be tolerated here. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Kurt Landefeld. He is a candidate for Bradenton Ward 4 City Council. Kurt, it's great to meet you finally. I thank you for coming and accepting this invitation. Tell our viewers a little bit about you. I know you're no stranger to politics. You're somewhat new to the Manatee County area since 2016. Why did you decide to get involved in politics here in Bradenton?
Well, it's kind of a continuation of what I've done through most of my adult life, Mark. But when we moved here in 2016, my in-laws had been in the community for many decades before then. They had been involved. And I initially just got asked to step onto the board for our homeowners association at River Isles, and then the year after that they wanted me to be president, and so they elected me to do that. And then the year after that they asked me to do it again, so I got elected a second time. And then that second year, 2019, Mayor Wayne Poston appointed me to the Planning Commission. I had gotten to know both Wayne and the previous city councilman, Bemis Smith. They would come out to River Isles regularly for pancake breakfast and other events and things like that. But I always had an interest in local political affairs especially. And so once I got into the Planning Commission, I got to know more about the city of Bradenton. And candidly, the more I got to know, the more I kind of wanted to step in and help do my part. And it seems like there are a lot of people who have come into the Bradenton area who bring other experiences and are doing likewise. And one of the most gratifying things has been that those who have been here for decades seem to open their arms up and welcome folks like myself to pitch in if we want to help.
Bradenton truly is a friendly city. A lot of people laugh at that, but they haven't lived elsewhere to where they really understand the dynamics of Manatee County, especially the city of Bradenton. You bring up Bemis Smith. I thought he did a really good job for Ward 4 for a really long time. Thankfully, Bemis is, I say this in jest because, Bemis is a little long-winded. He knows it, and we get through 30 minutes of this just by me asking him, how are you?
Yes.
I love you, Bemis, but you know it's true.
Yeah.
You are running against an opponent who has had his fair share of issues. Tell me why. You explain why you're getting into politics. Tell me what is it about your opponent that you feel you can do differently or better?
Well, I've been involved in politics for a very, very long time in Ohio and now here in Florida, and I've been around mostly very, very good people, very good people in both political parties. And I have found that the best politics, in other words, the best way to serve a community, is when these people work hard to get to common ground on issues. You listen to your other folks, you hear different points of view, and if you come up against something controversial, you work at it until you find a solution that's going to be the best for the most number of people. So that's always been the kind of, if you will, politics that I've enjoyed. I will just say that, and I supported Bemis in his 2018 campaign. I was with him on election night, expecting to celebrate. I did not think that there was going to be what turned out to be. When his opponent made the front page of the Bradenton Herald in that election season, claiming that Bemis had come onto his property and had cut the brake line on his RV, and tried to make an issue out of it. And then when the Bradenton Herald reported the next day that the Bradenton police had come out and had inspected the brake line and indeed had ruptured it, had rusted it, had not been tampered with, I thought there was no way that Bemis's opponent could have any credibility to get any sort of traction. So it count me among the shocked about what happened in that election. But it was a harbinger of, I think, of what was to come. In 2019, as you have written about, current councilman made headlines for himself at the DeSoto Festival.
Right.
And made a bit of a spectacle of himself and embarrassed the community in the process. In 2020, he and Councilman Roth teamed up to try to engineer a change of the charter. And I testified twice before council in opposing those changes. And for me, it was a very simple thing. I saw their efforts as kind of a naked grab for power to neuter the mayor's office and to let those councilmen kind of call the shots. And I don't think that's a good way to run the city, and I opposed it. But on a specific issue, that was one where he and I were very much on opposite sides. I was gone for most of last year working for a college up in West Virginia, so I missed some of the activity here, but I began to hear more stories about personal behavior and things like that. This year, coming into the election season, I was approached and asked if I would consider running, because it turns out that I wasn't the only one who was seeing and not feeling comfortable with what the incumbent had been doing with his office. So having made the commitment, I will tell you I have been overwhelmed with the level of support that I have been getting in the community for this. And so I'm looking very much forward to very active and I think a very successful campaign.
Outstanding. I mean, you speak of sport. Well, first of all, the 2019 video of Bill Sanders roughing up that member. In full disclosure, you can see me dancing with my wife in the background of that video, so I apologize for anybody that had to see that. You speaking of support, I mean, it's pretty rare that I throw my support behind somebody I haven't even met yet. But when it comes to Bill Sanders, I mean, it's just, he is so harmful to what's going on with city politics, and so he brings just such vitriol into the city hall and staff. And I've heard a lot of stories about how staff was being treated by him in the past like that. I mean, what's your outlook on how elected officials should work with staff?
Well, I respect staff incredibly. In fact, in my capacity as president of the Homeowners Association, I developed great relations with Chief of Police, the Fire Chief, Head of Public Works, any number of departments. And I got to tell you, the folks at my personal encounters have been just terrific. And we've asked Public Works to come out and do a number of things for our community. And I feel bad sometimes because I keep thinking we don't want special treatment, but they give us top level service. And so I, in fact, apologized to the head of Public Works more than once because I said, I wish I could do more for you than just say thank you. But in fact, that's how we feel about it. I have great respect for the professionals in government service. And so to hear stories, as you have, that they are being abused or bullied or disrespected is upsetting. Now, here's the other part of the politics of that, Mark. when someone conducts themselves in a public way with incivility, when they're rude, when they berate, when they bully, that leads to one thing politically. Usually it leads to isolation. People don't want to be around you. And in public life, if people don't want to be around you, if they don't want to work with you, then the next step is that you become totally ineffective in your job. And so I think, to be blunt, I think that the incumbent has reached that point.
Well, you certainly, like I said, have my support. But as I've said, I'd probably support Satan over, Bill Sanders at this point. So I'm glad that a very qualified person like yourself is coming into the fray to get involved, because you've been serving on the planning commission for a while now, and I think that's a big advantage to go ahead and kind of hit the ground running. I mean, would you agree? And tell me why.
Yeah, the planning commission experience has been terrific. And in fact, right now we are doing a comprehensive review of all of our codes and rules. We're trying to figure out what should be the guideposts for the city going forward into these next decades. I'm going to say thankfully to previous administrations here in this town and previous councils, they have set the stage for this city to take a big leap forward. All the groundwork that was done around the Riverwalk, trying to get Old Main ready, even the things that people don't think about, but water treatment, things like that, all the infrastructure things. There was a lot of time and money and effort and some work spent to get those things done. And because they've been done, now we're at a point where the Riverwalk is getting extended, and now there's going to be an open conversation about whether the city hall property should be sold and put to a more profitable use there. But it's because of all those who came before us that's now possible. And the other thing I think about in terms of the Planning Commission, everybody's been reading about the need for what I call workforce housing. And I know that the first response is find a government program to kind of create and go in and subsidize or things like that. What I hope to do if I got onto council is that I know that the market is responding with new kinds of building materials, new kinds of approaches to housing that I hope maybe some of the local builders will take advantage of. And I want to connect a couple of companies I know of in particular to folks here in town and to see if the kinds of very cost-effective, high-quality products that they're presenting are the kind of things that we could use here in Bradenton. If so, that has the possibility not only of accommodating some of the influx of the new people coming into town, but we have a lot of old housing that's ready for a rehab, a redo, or whatever, an infill. And so that kind of materials and those kinds of houses may be the kinds of solutions that will add to helping us solve the overall problem of providing good quality workforce housing for the middle class people who need it and don't deserve to be priced out of their home or apartment.
That's great, because there's been such an effort from Manatee County, but especially with kind of Bradenton leading the charge with Realize Bradenton, to make this a live, work, and play environment. And it's kind of like, I mean, it's really kind of a fantasy the way prices are going for homes right now. That eventually might correct itself. We'll see what happens with that. But the city races. Well, talking about infrastructure, Braden has really done a great job keeping up with its infrastructure. They have a good, solid plan, and they're doing it yearly, and they're replacing these ancient sewer lines and water lines that have been in the city for some 40, 50, 60, 70 years sometimes. But infrastructure really comes down to the number of people that can handle it, or that has that impact on infrastructure. And traffic sucks in Bradenton. I know there was a lot of talk going on with the bridge and doing these traffic reroutes and stuff. I don't know if any of that has changed over the last few months, but do you see anything coming up in the future, or do you have any ideas yourself that can address traffic in the area?
Yeah, I wish I had a magic wand on that, Mark, and I do not. I will say that I've read about all the possibilities that have been discussed. It seems like people are settling on the idea of a flyover bridge in some capacity. Where and how that happens, it still seems to be up in the air. We're looking at different modes of transportation perhaps to access the islands. You've heard talk about the ferries. I suspect that we'll probably have to develop more of a public transit capacity in some regard to accommodate people. People are coming here because they love us, and sometimes, as we found out in national parks, we can love them to death, and we want to make sure that we don't get loved to death here. We wanted to make sure that folks who come to Bradenton are welcome and have a good time. Those who choose to live here can get around their communities. One thing I would mention about downtown in particular, I do believe we're going to have more people living in the core downtown area. The next thing that should happen with that is that we should find a major grocery store willing to locate in the downtown area to take care of those folks. And they would prefer it. I mean, it would add to the whole walkability, a part of the lifestyle that we're looking for. But I think we're going to reach that density here in a fairly short time that a Publix or some other large chain like that would actively consider locating a store in downtown. So I would consider that a big step forward as part of the overall development for
No, that fits into the plan greatly, but I do love your honesty. I mean, there really is only so much that we can do. It's refreshing when a politician will come up and say we're basically screwed in one area.
Well, let me just say, our family first started coming down here from Ohio in the 1970s when my mother and father-in-law bought a condominium out on Anna Maria, the Nautilus at 71st and Gulf. And so, and then 10 years later, they were down here vacationing, and they took a drive east out 2-lane Route 64 and ended up out in River Isles, which was then still a brand new community. And they bought the last lot on the Braden River within that community. So in the mid-'80s, they then moved from Ohio down here. But the family continued to vacation at the condo out in Anna Maria. So we've seen the community, if you will, from both the eyes of the vacationer and now as a resident. And we know that we would love to be able to get to the island more easily than we do, and we're going to have to figure out some ways to do it. I wish, as I said earlier, I wish I just had a magic. I'm sure everybody wishes they had a magic wand they could just wave to solve this thing.
Right. I mean, Braden was only so big back in the day. I mean, so the design is what it is, and there's really no room to build that infrastructure out as far as traffic goes. Let's talk a little bit about politics in general. I'm not a big fan of nonpartisan races. Especially when it comes to the school board, but also for the city. I think it really limits voters to really kind of understand someone's politics. What do you think about nonpartisan races, and should they be?
I didn't really have a strong opinion about it when I got down here because I was used to it up in Ohio. Local races like these would be nonpartisan, running in the odd years. And so the one thing that's different is that these races are in the even years, and so turnout tends to be higher because, well, in this year, as you know, we'll have an election for U.S. Senate and for governor and then for all the houses and stuff like that. I guess, Mark, to be blunt, because it seemed to work for us up in Ohio, I didn't give it a second thought down here, and I can't give you a strong opinion one way or the other. I would just say this, though, back to the civility issue, and that is that I respect the fact that people have strong opinions and are in different parties and all that kind of stuff. I like it sometimes when I don't know necessarily if they have an R or a D after the name when we're talking about stuff, because then now I can start asking about the issues and we can start figuring out, where we are. When I lived up in Ohio, I worked with Democrats and Republicans very comfortably in a town very much like Bradenton. It was a tourist-based economy. And the people in the town, they might have parted their ways when it came to a national election or something like that. But when it came to trying to solve local problems, we put aside the labels, if you will, and just focused on the common sense of getting a main street redone or something like that. So I hope I'm not equivocating, but that's...
No, it's actually a very good, very interesting question, and probably the first decent argument I've heard for nonpartisan politics. But ultimately I would disagree because I think all elections are local, and I still think people should at least have an idea of kind of where someone stands. I mean, and they're there are stereotypes to each party. You know, I mean, there are fiscally conservative Democrats and there are tax spend Republicans. And I know you have to be careful in this race because I know you're not really, if correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like allowed to declare yourself publicly as one party or the other. But would you describe yourself as someone who is fiscally conservative with the taxpayers' dollar?
Yeah, I think. Well, for example, when I was Parks Commissioner up in Ohio, we had a county park district like they have here in Manatee County. It was an appointed position by a local judge. That's how you became a commissioner. There were 3 of us that did that. But it was supported by 2 property tax levies, you know, and I made sure, and our budget was relatively small, $4 or $5 million a year or something like that. But I felt a special responsibility that whoever came to our meetings and heard, or whoever read about the park district online or whatever, that we made an extra effort to make sure that the finances especially were easy to understand and transparent, so people had a very good sense that their money was being spent in a responsible way, because we would have to come back to them at some period of time when that levy was up and ask for their support again. And that translated a few years later when I was down here and president of our HOA. The one big accomplishment I had, if you will, while I was president was that I had to stand before the membership and ask them to spend over $100,000 to put a new roof on our clubhouse. Not a big deal in the large scope things, but for folks who were chipping in their monthly fee to support the HOA, to think that they were going to spend $100,000 on something was fairly significant. It was great that I could stand before them and make sure they understood to the penny how and where that money was going to be spent. And again, speaking to the fiscal responsibility of people here and then those who preceded me at the HOA, I could look at them and say, we should thank those who came before us because they were wise with their money, so that today I don't have to ask you for a special assessment for a major expenditure. All I have to ask you to do today is to allow us to spend money from our reserves to have this job done. So I've seen, I guess I'm an adherent of fiscal responsibility. Another story from my past, when I was a park commissioner, one of my friends got elected county commissioner in our county, and this was right at the recession. So he got elected in 2008. He came into office, and the county budget there was, again, a fraction of what it is here. It was $32 million. But revenues were falling off the cliff like they were everywhere else in the country. He and I, because I would listen to him, he was a local developer, by the way. I sat in his office for hours as he would go through line by line in the budget. And within 2 months, he had managed to cut 20% out of that budget and did not miss a step in providing services to the people in that county. Did not lose a job. There were some people who got early retirements. There was some reduction in forces, but he figured out how to provide the same quality level of service to the residents even as we cut the budget for 20%. And so, I guess if you say, I know the government can always spend its money better, and I've seen it happen, and I know that we can make sure that people have the quality of services that they deserve and are looking forward to, and we don't have to go out and ask for tax increases every time we want to do it.
Good. Just in a few minutes that we have remaining, tell me what you see as some of your top priorities, God willing that you take office.
Well, I think I mentioned 2 of them. The workforce housing is really critical. I think, and it's critical because I think we can actually take advantage, as I said, of what the market is coming up with and bringing some of those solutions into the community. And I would like to be able to be part of that. Because if we do it right, we won't just have put a Band-Aid on a problem. We will have actually presented something that will stand in this community for decades to come. And that's what we need to have happen. I mentioned at the top that the city is on the cusp of taking another big, strong step forward. And the first part of that conversation is going to begin around the City Hall property and that decision and how that gets resolved.
It's a long conversation.
It is. But If that happens and if that does move forward, it will have a ripple effect throughout the core downtown. You will see as much work has been done on Old Main, there will be more work done on Old Main. And then there will be work that will ripple out through the core downtown for that. There are, as you probably are aware, development opportunities to the east over by where the Riverwalk is being extended. Those have to be handled handled professionally as well. We'll see how that turns out. So I would say workforce housing, take the next step forward with the urban core stuff, and hopefully restore a level of civility to the conversation around all those issues and the other stuff as well.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, Manatee County and the city of Bradenton. This is your Ward 4 candidate who is opposing Bill Sanders. And Kurt Landefeld has my first official Manatee Herald endorsement. As you can see, I hope you enjoyed this conversation, got to know a little bit more about Kurt. And Kurt, again, thank you for coming.
Mark, thank you
so much.
It's been a pleasure.
And have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello again, Manatee County, and welcome to another edition of Manatee Herald's Let's Talk, where liberal, blah, 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 blah. Do I need to clap again?
No, you're good.